In central China, a man has died following an outbreak of an unknown pneumonia-like virus, which officials say comes from the same family as the deadly SARS virus.
While we so would have wanted to focus on our economy, anti-corruption or our environmental work, the outbreak in Wuhan forces us to take quick action as panic is spreading throughout China. But despite imposing a total lockdown of the city, the spread continued, reaching outside of the province and continuing to infect new patients. As the first death was reported, we realized that it had already gotten out of hand and proclaimed a nationwide lockdown. And with this, we declared war on the invisible enemy, mobilizing the whole state apparatus in the fight. Yes, the economy will take a huge beating, but if we don't manage to stabilize, the Chinese century could very well turn into another century of humiliation. So immediately widespread testing for the virus was implemented, but fearing loss of legitimacy for the party if things continue to get worse, which they have with the virus now spreading outside of China as well, Xi Jinping adopted the zero COVID policy, a policy of doing everything in our power to destroy the virus. Which meant adopting even stricter lockdown measures, like declaring a curfew and going as far as burning infected bodies, all to slow down the spread of the virus. But the only way to truly stop it is with a vaccine, so we quickly put our biological research institutes and pharmaceutical companies to work on research and testing a vaccine. But as things started looking a bit better with research on it starting, another punch hit us straight in the face. Destabilization in the Middle East caused oil prices to skyrocket, which led to stock market crashes around the world, including in our oil-dependent country. Something which has made our economy grind to a complete halt in combination with COVID. So while we must contain the virus, we now also need to control the oil crisis as well as the political protests and destabilization that has followed both. And it starts with stopping the freefall and expanding our welfare to attempt to stop the protests of the growing unemployed. But we now stand at a crossroad on how to complete a full recovery. Either we diversify our oil trade or we expand domestic production. With both the nationalists and the new left supporting domestic production, they could convince the centrist of Xi Jinping to pursue this option. And so we started several projects, like beginning to drill oil in Xinjiang and preparing for synthetic oil investments. But while we worked on economic stabilization, the pandemic had worsened, and with the vaccine still far away, we must continue to work on controlling the virus. To slow its spread, we further expanded our repressive measures, using our extensive surveillance state to greatly expand our tracking of the virus. We would also expand our funding for vaccine research, putting us really close to the end of testing and start of full-scale production, which allows us to return to the economic crisis, as with Saudi Arabia having collapsed into civil war, it has become even worse. Thankfully, our synthetic oil investments had been a success, and our economic sphere finally started to stabilize again, with our industrial development once again advancing, especially as price control on energy allowed our factories to return to previous profit margins. And so the economic crisis is over and the Chinese nation has rejuvenated. Foreign investments are once again flooding in, corruption has been lowered, and together with the COVID vaccine being a huge success, turning around the infection numbers and returning our nation to normalcy, the dream of a Chinese century is back. And this leaves one thing before the 20th National Congress in 2022, stabilizing the political sphere. Because during the turbulent time of the crisis, protesters, specifically from the liberal factions in the CPC, had flamed up, making Xi Jinping start several crackdowns against them. While these were largely successful, it forced Xi and his central allies to make concession to the populist demands instead, as well as to the growing faction of the New Left, who seek to return towards the true socialist project of Marx and Mao. And this New Left faction would rise even more in prominence with a second economic crash, caused by the death of Wall Street as the American polarized society reached the boiling point. And this collapse would be felt around the world, as the biggest economy in the world would later collapse into a civil war. The fall of the United States will naturally have huge effect on our power in Asia, but with our internal problems left, using this opportunity will have to wait. Thankfully for our political situation, the new left, nationalists and centrists have been cooperating, like through further expanding the social safety net, which has allowed for full political stabilization. And so the 20th National Congress arrived, where Xi Jinping further consolidated his power as the chairman, paving the way for the future 5 years of China. And the absolute first thing he would do was to gather the top PLA officers and order the start of planning for an invasion of Taiwan. Yes, we might be in an economic crisis, but so is everyone else, and with the USA, the strongest guarantor of the status quo, out of the picture for now, this could be our final opportunity to strike. So we would enact some secret war mobilization and begin preparing the landing crafts that will be used for the operation. Mobilizing our navy, we put in action a blockade of the island, further destabilizing their economy and stopping foreign support from flooding in. At the same time, we also conducted the final training for our land and air forces. To our surprise, our mounting intention wasn't met with silence, and Japan and Australia formed the Pacific Defense Treaty Organization together with Taiwan, hoping to protect them. But undeterred by this move, we put our navy on extra high alert and initiated the first step of the plan, seizing the Kinmen Island off the coast of Xiamen. Despite the big garrison defending it, we managed to win the battle, and with the lessons of it learned, we will be able to take the island of Taiwan far easier. So we started the last step of the plan before full-scale invasion, Operation Silent Dawn. Massive bombings on their critical military infrastructure. Thus, we are ready to finish what Mao Zedong started, uniting China and achieving complete liberation of the Chinese population. After gaining naval and air superiority over the island, we analyzed the first 3 days of the war, deciding to pursue a fast finalization with an immediate landing force being sent towards the island. Our invasion force of some of the most elite 10 divisions began assaulting the beaches of southern Taiwan. After some days of fighting, our marines had secured the most southern tip of the island and started attacking north, but our 2 other landings against the 2 cities of Tianan and Kaohsiung had a harder time. Still, with our marines distracting the first Taiwanese defense forces by going north all the way to Hualien, 2 of our divisions could establish control over Tianan. But this is where things started getting complicated, as with the Taiwanese forces now fully mobilized, they could stop our momentum and grind our offensives to a halt. With this being our first modern war and the PLA being overconfident, we also realized that our doctrines are outdated. And while we will attempt to adapt to the modern realities, in this state of war it's a bit too late to fix. Additionally, Taiwan and her allies have opened 2 fronts which we didn't expect. The first is that they've used their submarines to establish a naval blockade of our trade routes, and with our navy needed for the invasion, there is not much we can do about it. But even worse, they've opened the home front, with the Japanese intelligence agency launching a massive information campaign against us, significantly hurting our stability, which together with things like corporate heads protesting against the war is causing us massive problems at home. In a desperate attempt to fix the issue, Xi demobilized parts of the war economy, but this only helped slightly as the battles in Taiwan still remain a stalemate. To attempt to break it though, we restarted our bombing strikes, now much more indiscriminate, and launched the final offensive. Breaking through almost immediately in the north, we fell right into a trap, and the enemy forces could reoccupy Hualien, encircling 2 of our divisions. As panic spread, we started several attacks to try to free them, and after several days of assaults, we succeeded, capturing Kaohsiung and liberating the divisions. But if you look at the bigger picture, this had been a mistake. Our forces had lost important supplies, and the Taiwanese forces, now supported by the Japanese, started relentless counterattacks. And with the home front further collapsing, with the rebellion in Hong Kong, which we had to militarily crush, the war is slipping out of our hands. Especially as student protests spread across the nation. And from here, everything escalated to 110. The Standing Committee of the Congress resigned, removing the legitimacy of Xi Jinping, and with factionalism in the party growing to unstable heights, party and public uproar against Xi Jinping and the government grew significantly. With major protests in the southern cities as well, those hit the hardest from the war, stability reached the negatives. Despite the attempts to calm the situation by Xi, the chaos was unstoppable and spread all the way west to Xinjiang and Tibet, who both rebelled. And it all culminated with the military staging a coup, ousting Xi Jinping from power and declaring martial law in Beijing. And the absolute first thing the coup makers would do was to announce the complete withdrawal from Taiwan, accepting defeat and the signing of peace terms with Taiwan and her allies. But just because we are now at peace doesn't mean the protests and chaos has stopped, and while some in the military junta want to ride out the chaos to keep the power for themselves, these generals were quickly dismissed as lunatics. As if nothing is done to restore calmness, the military too would be ousted from power by the people this time. So, in cooperation with the CPC, a new Congress was prepared, of course purged of all Xi loyalists. And so the future of China was once again decided only a year after the 20th Congress. After days of discussions and debates, Hu Junhua was chosen as the new chairman of the CPC and president of China. As the spiritual leader in the new left faction in the party, which had grew into the strongest one after the fall of Xi's centrists and the difficulties for the nationalists, he stands ready to restore the party and the people's honor and make the People's Republic arise from the ashes like a phoenix. But there still remains conflicts, as within the new left two factions stand. Those who want to uphold the legacy of Mao and those who want to reform it to the 21st century towards socialist democracy. And the most popular, especially among the people protesting, is the faction of reformers, which was also the faction Hu decided to support. Almost immediately he set out to protect human rights, greatly cutting down the party's security apparatus inherited by Xi, and by publicly freeing political prisoners, most student protests started slowing down. Together with both Xinjiang and Tibet back under our control, stability is returning and we can begin the more major reforms of the reformist New Left. Inviting its scholars to join important positions in the party, many of whom are democratic socialists, they immediately started working on introducing freedom of speech in the National People's Congress and grassroots democracy, the first two steps to achieving democratic socialism. But political reforms isn't the only thing on Hu Junhua's desk, because maybe even more complicated are economies in shambles. With the corruption and mismanagement of Xi laid bare, and with the horrific economic consequences of the war, our debt to GDP ratio has reached over 100 and it's continuing to rise at an alarming rate. Poverty rates are also through the roof, in contrast to 2 years ago when Xi declared extreme poverty eradicated. Unfortunately, this has forced us to cut welfare benefits, but that's not enough to fix systemic problems. It is time to roll back Deng Xiaoping's reforms, who betrayed the people with his highly unequal growth. And now we once again stand at a crossroad, either invest fully into automation and tech, or return to the old days of fully planned economy. While taking the option of automated socialism would mean further indebting our nation, with the potential growth being huge, and with AI maybe the only way for a planned economy to work, we chose this risky path. It immediately started with the nationalization of Western-led industries, mainly their tech industry. Next up, we spent 50 billion on artificial intelligence research, as the sooner we start, the better. But all the reforms we seek to do aren't super futuristic, and we also started a crackdown on landlordism and the real estate companies like Evergrande Group, who have amassed huge debts in their capitalist endeavors. Taking inspiration from Hu Jintao's approach of economic development and social equality, we set out to at least stop the growing poverty crisis. And we mainly did this by instituting wage caps, a natural way to redistribute wealth. But despite our focus on planned economy, we still recognize the importance of business, so in order not to drive them over completely during all our reforms, we allow them to form associations to discuss with our government. Back to the future's reforms, we started fundamentally changing how we plan our economy, focusing on high-value industries like most Western countries, as opposed to relying on cheap labor and low-cost production that has long been a synonym for made in China. A part of this focus will be using our latest advancements in AI to create intelligent supply chains, helping modernize our factories and granting our army benefits in the process. As our research continues to advance, and with the intelligent supply chains being a success, we've decided to start introducing our technology into government jobs as well. The first area we could find was to use large neural networks to examine government expenditure in search of corruption. Despite most of the old guard being resistant to replacing our interior minister with a machine, it was surprisingly effective, and with all the money we saved, we spent it on further research. This time into supercomputing, so we can train and run our AI models that are becoming larger and larger. While waiting for our scientists to do their job, we turned back to our political reforms. Having continued working on it, the new left scholars had already finished the slightly painful but necessary process of democratizing the party and purging it of hardliners left from Xi's era or those who seek to return to Mao-era dictatorship. And this means we are ready to fully reform the People's Republic and its Congress, to destroy its huge bureaucracy and hold the first open and fair election China has ever had. The introduction of a popular socialist democracy has been achieved, and our socialism is no longer an empty slogan as it was during Xi and previous presidents, but truly integrated into the lives and thoughts of 1.4 billion people. With the presidential election having arrived, the nearly 3,000 deputies representative of the people could vote on 3 candidates. Hu Shunhua from the CPC, Wu Wei-hua from the Yisuan Society, and Hao Mingjing from the Chinese Peasants and Workers' Democratic Party. And in a turn of events that would shock the world, the president of China was for the first time not from the Communist Party of China, but from the new Yisuan Society. The technocratic social democrat Wu Wei-hua had been elected the new president of China. He immediately announced the continuation of Hu Shunhua's policies, but with even more aggressive futurism. Appointing several scientists and academics to important positions, the beginning of technocracy could be seen. Continuing the economic reforms, with all our tech focus, we are dependent on energy. So to not see our whole economy crash if another oil crisis hits, we began investing into modernizing our energy grid and started a nuclear construction plan. This was when we got the news that our scientists were ready to implement our supercomputers into government work with their new automatic program for managing economies. Implementing it immediately and replacing our economy minister with a computer as well saw even more success than our anti-corruption minister. No longer do we have the bureaucratic issues that have made planned economies fail, and with it we actually see our first fully stable monthly income growth after rolling back on Dengism. But we still have some work left though before we can surpass our monthly expense growth. Thankfully, investments under previous presidents will allow us to achieve this quickly, mainly thinking of our space program. By upping investments further, we will expand our satellite launching program, making us self-reliable, and we even have plans to in about a year launch our first attempt at asteroid mining, which if successful will greatly boost our economy. Together with further striving towards techno-utopianism and with electoral reforms at the local level successful, trust in the government has reached an all-time high, as the radical democratic reforms many were scared of have been proven successful. And this boost in confidence has gone hand in hand with our economic revival, ushering in the era of digital communism. Our tech investments have been a huge success, as it has made a planned economy possible, and for the first time in years our income growth is higher than our expense growth, meaning that soon we will be able to run surpluses. And only a month later the news arrived that our GDP to debt ratio was once again under 100%. In addition to this new economic era, we've reached a new societal era as well, as the confidence in our new democratic socialist order has brought with it a truly harmonious society. And so, with an internal golden age achieved, it is time to look outside of our borders. Because while we peacefully reformed our nation, our enemies have grouped together into the Pacific Defense Treaty Organization, led by the Japanese capitalist one-party state and the right-wing Republic of India, who claim our land and have invaded our Pakistani friends. We need to prepare our army and quickly contact allies to counter this aggression, because these enemies are surely plotting for the fall of our state. But this great Asian war that seems inevitable will have to wait for the next video, so make sure to subscribe and hit the bell because you do not want to miss it. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.